Okay, so good morning. Yesterday, we today's daf is Nazir daf Yud Zayin, and let's see, do I have the daf? No, I don't have it open. I'm going to get my summary open. And yesterday we learned a Mishnah in which we talked about what happens if somebody says that they are going to be a Nazir while they are in a cemetery. And we saw that, in fact, the Mishnah indicated that that the person would not actually be able to start counting the days of their Nazirut. We're talking about a Stam Nazirut, so it's either 29 or 30 days. They would not be able to start that Nazirut until they went through the purification process, and only then would they go through the process, begin the Nazirut. So even if they ended up being in the cemetery for 30 days, that wouldn't help them because the count hadn't started. And the second thing that we saw is that they would not be obligated to bring a korban, even though if a tahor person says that they're a Nazir and then goes into a cemetery, they are obligated not only to go through the purification process, but they have to bring a sacrifice. So but when you have somebody who says that they're going to be a Nazir in a cemetery, well, then it's, they're already in the cemetery, so they're not obligated to bring a korban. And the questions that we're going to be asking are, well, is that when we say that you don't bring korban, is that mean that we're treating you as if you aren't a Nazir at all, or are you a Nazir, but we're just not going to make you obligated in this situation? And we saw yesterday that we had two views. Rabbi Yochanan said that actually the person who tries to become a Nazir has made a valid statement and that they are in fact a Nazir. It's just their count hasn't started. And so, and their obligation to remain tahor hasn't started because they are not tahor, but they are already tameh. And Reish Lakish says, no, the statement isn't even effective. That in fact, once one becomes tahor, one would need to indicate that they are interested in having their Nazirut take effect in order for it to take effect. We then presented a series of 3 challenges to Reish Lakish, and the last one not having an answer. With the last one didn't have an answer. We didn't have an answer to the challenge, and so now we are going to pick up with Amar Mar on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line down, third word on the line, as we're going to offer a new interpretation of this argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And now we will say that everyone agrees that the statement of Nazirut is effective, and the debate is only about lashes. So Amar Mar Bar Rav Ashi says, Mechal. Everybody agrees that actually it takes effect. Kuli alma lo pligi dechayla. Everybody agrees that it takes effect. Ela ki pligi lemilke. Where are they arguing? They're arguing specifically about whether or not the person gets lashes. Rabbi Yochanan savar keven dechayli laki. That since, according to Rabbi Yochanan, since the person's statement of Nazirut takes effect, so as a result, they're going to get lashes. Even if while they're in the cemetery, they drink wine or they cut their hair, they're going to get lashes. And if they go out and are tahor and become tahor and then become tameh, they will get lashes. And Reish Lakish says, no, he does not receive lashes. Now, there's an important difference between Rashi and who's may not actually be Rashi, but we'll refer to him as the Mefarish on this page, and Tosos. And so let's take a look, and we'll look at both of them inside. So first we'll take a look on the Rashi side. That's the inner column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down in the narrow lines. Ela ki pligi lemilke. At Rabbi Yochanan savar keven dechayli laki, that according to Rabbi Yochanan, again, the person does get lashes. Afilu atuma dimiikara, even on the tuma that he gets because he was already in the cemetery when he became a Nazir. So the point is that Reish Lakish is saying, Rabbi Yochanan, is saying that as soon as the person, if assuming that he was warned, assuming that as soon as the person says, I'm going to be a Nazir and he's in the cemetery, tough luck. He goes straight to court. We're going to give him lashes for being purposely tamei while a Nazir. Demikara de Nazar bebeit hakvara, because he immediately, right? What is the thing that he initially became a Nazir in the cemetery? The Reish Lakish sabar, and Reish Lakish disagrees. And he thinks even though the Nazirut does take effect, so there's no special, he does have the prohibitions of Nazirut. Shehut sarach lishmor mikol dikduke Nazirut, so he has to be careful about all the different prohibitions of Nazirut. So he can't cut his hair, he can't drink wine, he can't have grape products. Low lucky. Even though he has those prohibitions, he does not get malkut. He doesn't get malkut for any of those prohibitions. Afilu atuma debesof, even a later tuma, meaning even if the guy now goes out of the cemetery, goes through the entire tahara process, and now returns to the cemetery, even in that situation, he will not get malkus ilo hadar va'amar, if he doesn't go back and say that in fact he wants to be a Nazir. So the point is that although according to Mar Bar Rav Ashi, Reish Lakish now says that the person's Naziru does have an effect, meaning that the prohibitions take effect, he would still say that in order for it to be on some level a biblical or full-fledged Nazirut, after the person becomes tahor, he's going to need to say something. And only then will he become a full-fledged Nazir, and only then will he potentially have an obligation of getting lashes if he were to violate something intentionally. So that is how the Mefarish interprets it. But Tosfos has a different approach. In the top of the medium-wide lines on the bottom of the page, towards the bottom of the page, where it says Haga. So this is how the language that the Tosfos has. Michal, when it comes to it being Chal, everybody agrees that it takes effect. So the Tosfos is going to say, and I'll preview it, that he disagrees with the Mefarish, and he says that in this view, according to Reish Lakish, there is no need at the end to say anything new, and that Reish Lakish says that it fully takes effect, and as soon as one becomes tahor, the count begins. But what do they disagree? And we're going to see that that according to Tosfos, they agree even that if someone were to drink wine or cut their hair, they would get lashes. And a disagreement is only about the tuma from the start. The tuma at the very beginning, that according to Reish Lakish, because the person is already in the cemetery, there is no lashes for that tuma. So let's take a look and we'll see it inside. That everybody agrees that when the person becomes tahor, it is fully effective. Ein sarach lachzor lidor benazir dechayal alav minazirus rishon. There's no need to repeat a desire to become a nazir. Remember, again, in Reish Lakish, according to the first argument and according to the view that is offered in the Mefarish, there is a need to repeat some kind of statement that you want to be a Nazir. But Tosfos says that's not true according to Mar Bar Rav Ashi. According to this understanding of the Machlokas, Reish Lakish does not need, and everybody agrees that you do not need to repeat anything. V'nicha hashta d'shvi olalo min haminyan. And now it's perfectly acceptable that we have the brisa that says that on the seventh day it will begin the count. Because remember, when a person is tamei mace, they get sprinkled on day 3 with the para aduma water, and they get sprinkled on day 7 with the para aduma water. Then they go to the mikvah, and as soon as they come out of the mikvah, they are a tvul yom, and they will become fully tahor at night. But what we saw is that 7th day they are already considered a nazir, and it counts towards the count of however many days the person is a nazir. Even without a further acceptance. That Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, that Reish Lakish would even agree. That if he were to either drink something like wine or any grape product, or he would shave, he would also get lashes even while he is tamei. The key pligi. So where do they argue? Where is the argument between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan according to this view? Lemalke perish atuma lechud. That it's only on the lashes of the initial tuma. I hasrobo atuma. So if he was given warning in connection with that. So what happens is the person is standing in the cemetery and he tells his friend Moshe, I'm thinking of becoming a Nazir right now. And Moshe and his friend Charlie say to the guy, listen, don't become a Nazir now. If you become a Nazir, you are going to be tamei as a Nazir, and that will make you subject to lashes. So Rabbi Yochanan Savar, Kevin Dechayli Nazirus Lashar Mili Ashtias Yayin Galachat Chayli Nami Atuma. That Rabbi Yochanan says, since the Nazir statement will apply both to drinking wine and to shaving and to cutting one's hair, so it should also apply to the concept of tuma. Im hasrubo, if warning is given, let's say that he needs to leave out below yatsa and he doesn't go out. And this answers, by the way, the question of how this is shouldn't this be considered a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, because after all, the person is already standing in the cemetery. So if he stands in the cemetery and says that he's a nazir, isn't there no ma'isa? But no, the fact that he could go out and doesn't go out, that in and of itself can be considered a ma'isa. Derachmana lo ma'ati, because the Torah did not have any special exclusion here. Elalim karban lechudei. The only exclusion is for the karban. And so as a result, Rabbi Yochanan would understand our Mishnah as saying that the karban is the only thing that is not obligated for a person who becomes a nazir in a cemetery. Lekaman. V'lo mimalkus detuma, and not from the lashes that are associated with becoming tamei. Reish Shimon ben Lakish, Reish Lakish says the following: Savar, he thinks, that even though the person is subject to the prohibitions of drinking wine and shaving, lo laki atuma, he does not get lashes for his becoming tamei immediately. The kaven demiate rachmanim karban, that since the Torah was excluding the concept of karban tuma from karban tuma, miate mikol din tuma af mimalkus. So as a result, the Torah is telling us that all of the concept of becoming tamei at the very moment of your becoming a nazir is excluded. And so as a result, you would not even be subject to malchus. So again, we have these two different approaches. We're going to focus primarily on the Tosfos approach as we go forward, but it goes equally with the Mefarish approach as well. So according to Tosfos, the argument is as follows. Everybody agrees that the prohibitions kick in. Everybody agrees that one gets malchus if one drinks wine or cuts their hair. The only question is whether, when our Mishnah said that one is exempt from a karban, is one also exempt from lashes. And so now we're going to ask 3 questions. And
before you go on,
yep, go ahead.
Something unusual here. We had to jump from the first generation of the Amoraim to the last generation of Amoraim here, with nothing in between. And that's kind of unusual.
That is interesting. So How do you know that the was the first one?
Well, we're talking Rabbi Loki, Yochanan, and Reish Lakish for the first generation.
Yeah. Well, but we don't know who was telling over this machlokas. So you're right. Obviously, but remember, of course, it makes Mar Baravashi has to live in a later generation because he is effectively reinterpreting the
Right.
machlokas.
200 years later.
But and that could help us understand why we could end up with this confusion.
Right. Yeah.
So what essentially seems to be going on is that many generations later, people are like, how could it be that Reish Lakish could have said this? It seems like there's an obvious counterpoint to it. And so Mar Baravashi says, well, we can reinterpret the machlokas as we've just outlined. So I think that
temple, there would have been there would have been people who would have had a closer Masorah. I mean, this is sort of Yerida Hodorot. It might have died out over the 200 years.
Well, that also, of course, could provide the flexibility because of the confusion over how the messages were conveyed as to how we ended up with this. But that's an interesting point that Mar Baravashi is in the last generation. So, all right. So we have now 3 challenges. So challenges number 1 is from our Mishnah. So Esvei Rabbi Yochanan l'Reish Lakish. And again, we're going to have these challenges that Rabbi Yochanan brought, and this is, of course, reinterpreting the challenge inconsistent with a Mar Baravashi approach to the machlokas. So Misha Nazir v'hu beveis kvaros, in our Mishnah it said that one who says that they're a Nazir while in cemetery, afilu hayesham shloshim yom, even if they're there 30 days, ain't olam ilo min minyan. None of those days count towards the 30 days that the person is going to be a Nazir for. Ve'eno maybe carbon tuma, and he does not actually, or maybe it's a but really, but he does not bring a sacrifice for tuma. So even though he's tameh the entire time, he's not going to have to bring a sacrifice. And what's the implication? So carbon tuma hu delo maisi ha milki laki lale, but he should get malchus, he should get lashes. So Reish Lakish says no, not necessarily. Bidinhu delays loka. That really it should say that he doesn't get lashes. Why does our Mishnah specifically focus on the carbon question? Elamishum de kabai lemisna seva, because at the end of our Mishnah, what does it talk about? Yatsa b'nichnas. If he left the state of being tameh and became tahor, and then he goes back into the cemetery, ola lo min minyan, the time that he was out of the cemetery counts towards his count, maybe carbon tuma, and he's going to have to bring a sacrifice for being tameh. So Tana Resha Aino maybe carbon tuma. So as a result, that's why the Resha began by focusing on the fact that the person would not bring a carbon for tuma, but in fact he also wouldn't get lashes. So that's point number 1. So we've responded to effort number 1. Effort number 2, Tashma. So 1 second. What about the following brisa? And these are the same. The 3 challenges involve the 3 brisas that we looked at yesterday. So, but in a different order, because this was the 3rd of the brisas that we referenced. So, bein tamesh and nazir tahor shenitma. What's the difference between a tameh person who becomes a nazir and a nazir who's tahor and becomes tameh? So the only difference, ella shetameh shenazir shvi shelo ololo min minyan. The only difference, and that this is going to be the key. The only difference is that the person who was already tameh and becomes a nazir, well, since they're not obligated in a korban, so then on the 7th day when they leave the mikvah, they already can count that day towards being in the count of their nazirut. But v'nazir tahor shenitma ein shvi shelo ololo min minyan. His 7th day cannot count because he still has to bring a korban. So what's the implication? What's the implication? Well, we didn't say that there's a difference between the lashing of the 2. Well, that implies that just as one would get lashes if one was a Nazir tahor and became tameh, so too, if one was tameh in the first place and became a Nazir, he would also get lashes. So Amar Le, Reish Lakish would say back to him, no, lolit tiklachat. They don't have to be equal with respect to haircutting. Well, 1 second. Aval Inyan Malkos Mai, what you're going to say that there's going to be different? Zeh loka v'zeh eno loka. You're going to say that they're different. Leisne, why not teach that? If there's a difference between those two cases, we should list that in the Mishnah, in this brisa, excuse me. B'takante kamairi. No, the point is that we're talking about the status of a person becoming a Nazir. It's during the time that they're a Nazir we're trying to find the differences. We're not talking about what happens as a result of them not being a Nazir, and so that's why Malkus doesn't have to be discussed here. And so we can say that these two that this brisa is fully consistent with Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish would say that this brisa is only talking about the count towards the time that one is a Nazir. So now that we get the third and the final challenge. Tashma Misha Hayatame bin Nazar. If somebody was already Tame and he became a Nazir, Asur Legaleach V'lishtot Yain. He is immediately forbidden to cut his hair and to drink wine. V'im Gilach V'shasa Yain V'nitma L'mesim. And if he were to drink wine, to shave or to drink wine, or to become Tame to the dead, he receives lashes. Well, 1 second. He's already Tame from the dead. So that doesn't that indicate that in fact he's going to be lashed for this tuma itself? And indeed, the Gemara answers to Yofta. In fact, this is a refutation. Now, one might be thinking along the following lines. Let's take a look in the Mefarish on the right-hand side of the page. This is 3 lines up in the narrow lines of what looks to be like Rashi. So, and he say Tashma Misha Haya Tame Benazar Asula Galevaloka Bishmamina Dekaven Dechaili Aleha Nazirut. Since the Nazirut has taken effect, Dahavi Asur Legaleach, because he's prohibited to shave, Loka, he gets Malkus. And so as a result, he also would get Malkus for the fact that he's Tameh, Vitiyuv to the Reish Lakish. And that seems to be a counter proof to Reish Lakish, who said that the person would not get Malkus for the lashes. Ubiyotza benechnas lo matzi lataretz. And we can't answer. This is what, of course, occurred to me when I was reading this. Well, why don't we just say that this brisa is talking about somebody who left the cemetery and then came back? Well, the Mefarish says, no, you can't say that. You can't answer that, Kidalael, as we answered this same brisa yesterday, when we saw it yesterday on Daf Yud Tes Vav Amud Bet, Tes Zayin Amud Bet. Daha ukhimna demodi Reish Lakish. Because at this moment, we are saying that Reish Lakish agrees that the Nazirut takes effect. The Kaile Be'isura. And so all the prohibitions take effect. About milky lo lucky, but he does not get Malkus. So the Ilu Hacha Mashma de Kaven Sha'asar Loka. And here the clear implication is that because there's a prohibition, he also gets lashes. Afal Gaf de Lo Hadar. Even though he did not leave and go back and say that he was becoming a Nazir. And so as a result, we see that this is actually a refutation of Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, as is often the case, as is generally the case, the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. And we say that in fact, the person has become a full-fledged Nazir. We just don't start the count. So now we're going to deal with a couple of related questions to this concept of whether or not, or what happens if somebody is in the cemetery. So the first question is, and we'll deal with a rush here that talks about a similar situation in connection with the Beit HaMikdash. So we'll postpone the introduction and we'll do that with connection with the rush. So let's see what Rava's question is. By Rava. Rava asked the following: Nazir v'hu b'beis hakvaros. You have this Nazir who's in a cemetery. Mahu. What's the story with him? Boy shehiya l'malkus olo. Does he have to be there for a specific amount of time, or does the fact that he's there for even an instant cause the obligation for lashes? Now, The rush helps us greatly here. Bottom line, just above, bottom line of the rush, there's a cheshek shlomo below that, but it's the bottom of the line of the rush, middle of the line. It says, "By shehia lamalkus," that does he need a waiting in order to get lashes? Shir shehia hamufareshes b'shvuas. It's something like what we have in Masechah Shvuas. This is on Daf Tet Zayin in Amud Bet, in Shvuas. Lemisha nitma ba'ones ba'azara. We're talking about somebody who accidentally became tameh while they were in the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash, because God forbid they're holding somebody's hand and that person is no longer living. She'enu chayev kares, that person is not chayev kares. Ella im kain shaha, as we turn to the page to Yud Zayin Mabet, and we again on the outer column, shir hishtachava shir hishtachava, that he has to stay there for the amount of time that he would bow down. But if he immediately starts leaving the Azara, then that's fine. The halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and this is a halacha from Moshe at Har Sinai, which is, of course, this week's parsha. So that is maybe a little bit of a Daf Yomi coincidence. And so the point is that the question that Rava is asking is, when that person who is a Nazir is in the cemetery, is there a requirement of some amount of time before the person is punishable with lashes? So, hey, Kidami, what's the case? So, lo tinzor. So, if one says, if we're talking about a situation where the person is standing in the cemetery before he became a Nazir, and the warners, the people who are warning, warn the person and say, please don't become a Nazir, because if you become a Nazir, you are going to get subject to lashes. So lama li shehiyah, why should there have to be any time of waiting? Nazir, my time alo by shehiyah. Why would a Nazir ordinarily not require any waiting? The kamasribe, because you warned the person. So hakanami kamasribe. So here too, they're giving him a warning. There shouldn't be any need to have a specific amount of time. So that can't be the case that we're talking about. So Ella, so as we turn to Yudzayin Bet, we say Ella kagon shenichnas b'shida teva umigdal, that he goes into the cemetery in a box essentially, and the box is closed, and so as a result, with no openings, and so as a result, he is not subject to a tuma because he's in a separate entity. So, and now uvachavero ufara me'alav me'aziva, and now the person comes and he removes part of the floor under him, and so as a result, the tuma comes into the space where he is located, and now he becomes tameh. So ki gemirin shehiyah beveis hamikdash. Do we say that this is like the situation where a person becomes tameh in the Beit HaMikdash, where we have to worry about how long that is? And so aval ibroi lo, but maybe the rule only applies in the Beit HaMikdash, that the need to wait for a certain amount of time. Odilma loshna, or maybe there's no difference. And the Gemara answers teku, that we don't know. We don't have a good answer. We're just going to have this unresolved issue, and so as a result, we would need to be strict. And the point is that, I guess the question of whether or not one gets lashes is an interesting question. But and so at least it seems here that in fact we would allow the person some amount of time to escape, and so we would not necessarily impose the lashes. But okay, so that's question number one, which didn't get really resolved. So let's find another question that hopefully we will be able to answer. And indeed, we will be able to answer this question, just not today. So, boy Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi asked the following: Nazir v'hu b'veis hakvaros. You got somebody who becomes a Nazir while he's in the cemetery. Ta'un giloach olo. So we need a little bit of background for this one, and that is the following. If somebody becomes Tameh in the middle of their Nazirut, so we've learned already that they have to go through the Tahara process, and on the 8th day they have to bring sacrifices. What we have not mentioned is that on as part of the Tahara process, right after becoming on that day, on the 7th day when they become tahar, after going to the mikvah, they also shave their head. So they're going to remember, of course, when you become a Nazir and you become Tameh, you have to restart your Nazirut. So as a result, not only do you restart your Nazirut, you restart all the growing of hair as well. And so the question is now in our case, in our Mishnah, where the person is not going to be obligated to a korban, and the person is going to be subject to lashes. So we have both a reason to, on the one hand, to say there should be maybe differences, or on the other hand, we have a reason to say that there should be no differences. So do we say that the head shaving is required or not? So kibai tiglachas. So tahor. So do we say the following? Kibai tiglachas. When do we require shaving? Tahor shenitma. Only with the case of a tahor who becomes tameh. To come at tameh lenazirus say because he undid his nizirus. Aval tameh shenazar lo. Or but maybe we would say that somebody who was tameh and became a nazir. We would not say that. Oh, Dilma Loshna. Or do we say, no, there's no difference. We're going to treat both cases the same. So again, 3 different efforts that we'll offer today, and we'll save the 4th one for tomorrow. So Tashma, Misha Nazar, V'hu B'veis HaKavaros, our Mishnah, Afilu Haya Im Sham Shloshim Yom, Eina Olol Min Aminyan, Ve'enu Mevi Karban Tuma. So again, we saw that in our Mishnah, we said that the days that the person is in the cemetery don't count towards the length of his Nazirut, and how many people are dead in the cemetery? I don't know. That's a good question. But at least one person. There's at least one person in the cemetery because the cemetery is causing the person to become tameh. If you go into a cemetery, you need to be sure to wash your hands afterwards. It's the whole. And in the old days, you would actually need to go through a very long process, a 7-day process of becoming tahor again. But in our case, we said that the person did not have to bring a korban. So what's the implication? Korban tumahu delo maisi aval geluchi boy. He doesn't have to bring a korban, but he will need to shave. So no, matam ka'amar. No, everything is going along together. This is the reason. Matam enu maybe korban tuma. Why is there no obligation to bring a korban tuma? Because mishum delo by geluchi. Because he doesn't need to shave his head. The point is that all of these ramifications are a single unit. And so as a result, when we say in our Mishnah that you don't have to bring a korban, it's effectively telling us that you also don't have to shave. So Tashma, that was proof number 1, and no success there. So proof number 2. Ein bein tamish and nazir tahor shenitma. There's only the only difference between a tameh, a nazir who is who becomes a person who's tameh who becomes a nazir, and a person who is tahor who becomes a nazir and then becomes tameh. Ela tamish and nazir shvi shelo ola min minyan. The nazir tahor shenitma ein shvi shelo ola min minyan. That we said, as we've seen already 2 other times before, that this brisa, that if a person, and at least once earlier today, if a person becomes tahor, if a person is tahor and becomes a nazir, well then, because they have to bring a korban on day 8, they are not going to be able to count day 7 towards their nazirut. But if the person is tameh to begin with, since they don't have to bring a korban on day 8, they can begin their count on day 7. So my lav halitiglachat shavin. Well, doesn't that show that in fact, when it comes to shaving, they're equivalent? Because we said that the only difference is day 7 versus day 8. So lo halamalkus zevizeh shavin. No, really, in connection with lashes, they're equivalent, but not with respect to, as we saw, because that was how we proved the position of Rabbi Yochanan in the last time. So, but when it comes to when it comes to shaving, maybe there's a difference. Well, 1 second. Aval tiglachad ma, you're going to say what with respect to shaving? Zem migalech, vazet eno migalech. That if one is tahor to begin with, he will have to shave. Vazet eno migalech. But if he was tameh to begin with, he will not have to shave. Well, listening, let the brisa state that as one of the differences. So Tana Shvi Shalo B'chol Mili. No, it's implied because the point is that we say that the seventh day is referring to everything that's associated with it. So when I can be tahor on the seventh day, so then that shows that I can be tahor on this. Since I can count the seventh day and I don't have to wait to day 8 to bring a korban, so too here I don't have to wait. So Tashma, proof number 3, our final effort for today. Ainly ela yemei tumaso she'ein ololo min aminyan. That when it comes to the Torah says that the days that a person is tameh, they do not count towards a person's time of being a Nazir. We saw that in our Mishnah, and this is a brisa that says the same point. But what about Yemei Chiluto Minayin? How do I know that the days that the person is confirmed as having tsarat? This is the skin condition that causes one to be sent outside the camp. What's that even when the person has that condition, it also does not count. And by the way, the rule is that it does not count, but it doesn't cause the person to have to restart. It just is like a timeout. So the dinhu, maybe we can make that as a logical argument. So ma yemei tumato migalech maybe korban, when it comes to the person's who is tahor and becomes tameh, they have to shave and bring a sacrifice. And similarly, when somebody has sarat, he also has to shave and bring a sacrifice. And when it comes to tuma, those days do not count for the person with respect to his nazirut dates. So too, when it comes to tzarat, we won't count those dates. Well, no, that logic can't be our argument because because when it comes to the days of Tuma, as I mentioned before, when you become Tameh, you have to restart your count. So it's not going to be a good logical argument. Maybe that is the reason that it won't count for him in the days of the term. But Tomer b'mechiluto. But when it comes to tzarat, it does not cause the person who's a Nazir. If a person who's a Nazir gets tzaras, we don't have the guy restart all of his Nazirut days. We just allow him to pick up where he left off. So maybe we would even allow the person to have those days count. So as a result, we cannot bring a proof from that. So let's bring a proof from somewhere else. Uma Nazir b'kavar, if a person becomes a Nazir while in a cemetery, shisa'aro ra'oi l'tiglachat, that his hair is fit for shaving, ein ololo min aminyan. We say that yet those days do not count towards his Nazirut dates. So yemei chiluto she'ein roi l'tiglachat, and when it comes to a person who is a tzarat, where the hair is not fit for shaving, so then lo kol shekain she'ein ololo min aminyan. Isn't it certain that the person is not going to have those days count? And the point is that here we can't say that there's a cause for the previous days to be canceled because there were no previous days. So maybe we can say that our case helps show that we should actually have this approach. So that's the proof of this brisa. So the brisa has shown the logic of saying that both days of Nazirut, days of Tumah, and days of Mitzorah do not count towards a person's Nazirut period. So my lav tiglachat Tumah. Well, 1 second. We said in this at the end of this brisa, shesa'aro that his hair is fit for shaving. So what kind of shaving are we talking about? aren't we talking about the shaving that's associated with the fact that he's tameh from the beginning because he was created his Nazirut in the cemetery? And so that shows that one, in fact, does have to shave one's head if one becomes a Nazir in the cemetery. Lo tiglacha tahara. No, you could say that this is talking about the shaving at the very end of the person's Nazirut. As a reminder, there are two different times that a person has to shave one's head in connection with Nazirut. One is if the person becomes tameh in the middle. So as part of the tahara process, they will have to shave their head. But also at the very end of the Nazirut, they also have to shave their head. So Hachinami Mistabra, and indeed one could say that it makes more sense to say that we're talking about the shaving, that the head shaving that we're referencing here is actually the head shaving at the end of the Nazirut. Because if you say that this is the shaving of Tumah, we also said, right, in the end of this brisa, we compared the head shaving with respect to Nazirut, where we said that it was roi l'tiglachat, and then when we said with respect to tzarat, it was not roi l'tiglachat. But in fact, if what we're referring to is a shaving of tumah, when it comes to the tumah of tzarat, you do have to shave your head. So the hair is fit for head shaving. So it can't. So doesn't this show that this brisa cannot possibly be talking about head shaving for tumah, and therefore it's definitely talking about the head shaving at the end of one's period? So, because Yemei Chlutomi lo by tiglachat, as we are, we're now at the top of Yud Chet Amud Aleph, and the Gemara answers lo. No, although you might want to say that argument, you can't prove either direction from this brisa because tiglachas the nazirus katani. No, because we're talking about a tiglachas of nazirut. So when we say that there's no hair cutting, no head shaving for a person with sarat, the point is that there's no head shaving, that person's head is not fit for shaving in connection with Nazirut. One would not be allowed to shave one's head at the end of the Nazirut period because once one has sarat, one has to wait until that sarat is done before cutting one's hair for Nazirut. And so what we end up with is that this brisa doesn't prove anything. We could actually say either opinion. We can say either the fact that maybe one who becomes a Nazir in a cemetery does require head shaving, or one who is a Nazir in a cemetery does not require head shaving. So we need a fourth answer. And what is that fourth answer? You're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf, and we'll learn that fourth answer, God willing, tomorrow.
Don't be late.
Yeah, don't be late. You don't want to miss the fourth answer. Have a wonderful day. Good to see you. James is not here today. I'm sorry.
Well, till tomorrow, yes.